Not a Word by Rambling Writer. Read by My Name is R. Chapter 4. Leave None Behind. The front doors of the house loomed before Locke like the gaping maw of some fanged beast, even though they weren't even that large. She'd never imagined a simple, ordinary doorframe could look so toothy. And she was plunging headlong into this monster. Locke swallowed and re-entered the house, ready to be chewed up and spat back out again. At least she had a plan. A risky plan. An outline of a risky plan. Part of an outline of a risky plan. Part of an outline of a risky plan that could easily, and probably would, get her killed. But it was a plan. That was better than nothing, right? Right? Locke immediately turned left and found the stairwell she was looking for, the one she'd climbed to the servants' floor what felt like ages ago. She should have known better. She barely set her hoof on the first step when she heard voices coming down. She shuffled back out, plastered herself against the wall, and listened. Time was of the essence, but Locke couldn't help herself. Need more ponies looking. What if the thief comes back? Look, she'll want to save her own skin. What kind of idiot would go back into a house where everyone's looking for them? Locke had long heard that the line between bravery and idiocy was a very, very thin one. But now she was beginning to suspect there was no such line, and instead quite a bit of overlap. I'm sorry, but did you see what she did to Dephilia? That was luck and desperation, not skill. She ran. She's never coming back here. And what if... Deciding not to push her luck anymore, Locke stopped listening. How intently were the ponies in the house looking for her? It didn't sound like they were spread out. They'd be surprised she was still in the house. She was surprised she was still in the house. But there were only so many ways to the upper floors, and it was natural that ponies would congregate near them. She needed to get to the 4th floor, a way that no pony else would use, and even assuming the dumbwaiter didn't make noise, she herself had disabled it by breaking that gym. The light well. Where was it in relation to this? In the middle of the house. Keeping her ears up, Locke walked deeper into the house, barely even trying for stealth. She didn't hear any pony, which was a blessing. A small one, but she'd take all the help she could get. Maybe they were all up on another floor. As that one pony had said, there was no way she was coming back, right? The layout of the house was confusing, but Locke managed to make it to the light well without running into any pony. She opened up a window, climbed in, and closed it behind her. She looked up. The shaft seemed narrower than it had been the first time around. Whatever. Locke crouched in a corner, got a grip, and leapt up to the 2nd-story window. She kicked off the wall to give herself just enough lift to grab onto a 3rd-story windowsill on a perpendicular wall. Her bad hoof twinged, but she managed. Her hooves scrabbled on the wall for a moment before she pulled herself into the frame and jumped straight up enough to reach the 4th floor. Not bad. Wiggling the window open was a matter of seconds, and then she was inside. No servants about. They were probably running around on the lower floors, doing a lot of butt covering. Still, Locke kept her ears roving, listening, hearing nothing. After a few minutes of orientation, Locke made her way back to the 1st stairwell and the storage room next to it. Specifically, the spare lamp oil inside said room. It was all bottled up in neat, easily opened ceramic casks, complete with pairs tied together with ropes to be slung over the trunk. Locke took 3 such pairs. She had no idea how much oil she'd need, but she couldn't take too much without slowing herself down. She poked her head into the stairwell. Voices drifted up, but they were vague, distant. Taking yet another chance, Locke skipped down the stairs as best she could without letting the jars clink together. 3rd floor? Nothing. 2nd floor? Something, but not enough something to worry about. Locke scampered down the balcony in the entry hall and back into the house proper. The voices Locke had heard were a bit louder, but still muffled. Not anywhere near her. Locke skittered to the library and quickly shut the door behind her. For the first time, she realized how much her heart was racing. She leaned against the door, slowly sliding down it, and lit a hoof on her chest. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Unfortunately, with calm came common sense. She was very, 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 very lucky. What was she thinking? She was just walking through the place when every pony was on alert. Regardless of what she told herself, the fact she hadn't run into any pony was pure chance. They were out and about and alert, and she hadn't even thought of what she'd do if she had met one of them. You could always punch them. It seemed to work so far. Right. Punch them. Great plan. If it's stupid, but it works, it isn't stupid. Otherwise, breaking into houses during the middle of dinner would have been stupid. It kinda was. Still, she was here. Her plan had gone well so far. Now for the fun part. She went to the relevant bookcase and pulled it open as slowly and quietly as she could. The voices were louder, coming down the secret passage. They might have seemed louder because of the way they echoed, but Locke thought that making noise now and hoping not to get heard would be pushing what remained of her luck a bit too far. A hasty look around the room, and Locke quickly picked out several of the oldest, most menacing, evilest-looking books she could find. Evidence for the royal guard once she was out. Then she lifted one of the casks and slathered a shelf with oil. As she upended another jar, Locke cringed. She didn't have any particular love for books, but burning them was one of those things only done by crazies and dystopia supporters. Even though most of these books were on black magic, it just felt wrong. Freedom of speech and the press and information and all that. But desperate times, she needed a distraction. A burning library was certainly distracting. Locke kept praying the family wouldn't hear her. The passage to the storeroom was right there. All it would take was one pony, just one, to open the door and head inside. But Locke managed to stay quiet as she doused the place. Once everything except her was decently wet, she listened at the door to the library. Silence. She looked outside. No pony. Locke laid her last 2 jars just outside the door and trotted to the nearest lamp. Why was it, when she was being careful and sneaking around, she got found out, yet when she was nearly scrambling around with minimal caution, she didn't run into any pony? Come to think of it, how many ponies were in this house? A lot of the bedrooms on the top floor had been empty. There might not be that many in the first place. And if they were all trying to get the ritual done on the off chance she hadn't cut and run... Locke delicately lifted the still-burning lamp off its hanging. She turned it over and cringed. If this went wrong, she was pretty much doomed. But she didn't have much of a choice. She tossed the lamp at the puddle of oil seeping out from the secret room. The lamp shattered, and the oil went up immediately. It'd be nice to watch, but Locke turned and ran the second the fire caught. She took the long way around, galloping the perimeter of the house. Going straight to the ritual chamber was asking for even more trouble than she was already in. No ponies. Maybe they were all working on the ritual. After a solid 30 seconds of running, Locke skittered to a halt at a certain corner. Other voices were yelling frantically, cursing. She peeked around the corner. Ponies were scrambling in and out of the ritual chamber, some of them screaming for water. Well, at least the distraction was working. Locke settled in, waiting for the traffic to stop, or at least for the unicorn to be taken out. With a victim already chosen, Locke didn't think even these ponies would risk throwing her away and having to kidnap some pony in Canterlot. Once ponies had stopped streaming out of the room, with no sign of the unicorn, Locke waited another 30 seconds, sidled around the corner, and nudged the door to the ritual chamber open. 2 big, stocky ponies were still standing guard, pressed against the wall opposite the secret door. A few wisps of barely visible smoke were leaking from invisible cracks in the wall, and although it was hard to see from Locke's angle, the unicorn was on the table, her chest shallowly moving in and out. The statuette Locke had seen earlier was sitting at the head of the table, its eyes glowing a writhing red. 1 shot. Locke twisted her hoof around the bag's drawstrings, threw the door open, and charged. She swung the bag at the nearest guard, smashing him on the head before he realized the door had been thrown open. He crumpled like a doll. The other guard actually managed to get a brief look at Locke before facing a faceful of plundersack. She fell the same way. Locke didn't spare them a glance before moving to the unicorn. She cringed. More runes, deeper and more angular and more numerous than before, had been carved into the unicorn's body, making her look like an equine chalkboard. One of her front legs was twisted at a strange angle, and she didn't seem to be as aware as before, but she was still breathing regularly, if shallowly. Locke stuffed the focus statuette in her bag, for evidence. The moment she touched it, it felt like needles were crawling up her veins. She flinched, shook her hoof once she released the focus, and lightly slapped the unicorn in the face. "Hey, you awake?" The unicorn blinked blearily up at her. She tried to say something, but her mouth was sealed shut again. She nodded. "Right," Locke said. "Now hold still." She cut through the runes again, the unicorn moaning quietly with each slice. She jiggled the nullifier ring open again and hoisted the unicorn's bad leg across her withers. Locke was uncomfortably aware of how warm and wet the unicorn's coat was. "We're going to need to move fast," she said. "Sorry if I drop you." She exited the room and began walking down the hallway, away from the library, letting the unicorn lean heavily on her. Not a pony was in sight, although she could hear them well enough. You came back," the unicorn whispered. It sounded like that was all she could manage. "Right thing to do," said Locke, preempting her conscience. The unicorn laughed weakly. "Said the thief. Hey, I only steal from ponies who can afford it." "It's still stealing." Locke brushed the thought away and listened. Yelling echoed through the hallway, and she could hear the cracking of wood. The fire was growing. "What did you do?" "Set all their black magic books on fire. And, by now, a lot of their other books." Good riddance." Locke pushed a door open. It was a 2-level living room that they had run through less than half an hour ago. Wow. Thankfully, it was now empty. She plodded towards the staircase. Down. "Hang on." The unicorn lifted her head enough to look around. "This..." "I know where to go from here," Locke said, sounding more confident than she felt. "And my preferred path is about to go up in smoke." Boo! The 2 of them stumbled down the steps with some difficulty. Locke sniffed. The air was still clear. Did smoke get carried up by the rising air, or did it sink to the floor? She remembered something from when she was young about staying down if you were caught in a burning building. How fast did fire spread, anyway? So, since this was a floor down, they were safe, for now. Still, no ponies. "You feel fine? Mentally, I mean," Locke said as she shuffled across the room to the door. "Not really," the unicorn mumbled. Is it magically induced not-fineness? No? Good." Locke shoved the door open, looked left, no pony. Looked right, no pony. And went left, praying she was getting the layout right. "I'm not fine, too." You're saving my life," How Locke took the first right. The long, paneled hallway looked promising. If I hadn't decided to rescue you the first time, you wouldn't be able to sleep. I'd be home right now with over 1 million bits in loot. A million? The unicorn giggled. I gotta become a burglar. And get lucky. And a fence. And some lockpicks. They kept shuffling. Locke kept talking. It was a way to make the situation seem less dire to herself, and probably to the unicorn as well. And the unicorn really needed a psychological pick-me-up. Speaking of getting lucky, why'd they take so long to get the ritual going? I'd have thought they'd started it as soon as possible to prevent something like this from happening. They did. You know that stuff we threw out? Kinda important. The unicorn giggled again. Locke suspected it was less humor and more Schadenfreude. They had to completely rework everything and even pick a less potent one, I think, from what I heard. And they weren't even close to starting. Which meant Locke could have probably gone straight for the Royal Guard. But whatever, she didn't dwell on the past. Now she was getting the unicorn out. Now she was limping through an unfamiliar mansion that was slowly catching fire. The past couldn't kill her. Now could. When they reached the end of the hallway, Locke was granted the greatest sight she'd seen since she first got her cutie mark. The entrance hall, completely empty. The fire was really diverting. She sniffed. The air was still clear. Almost there, she said. Can you pick up the pace a little? I can try. And whether it was the suggestion or the sight of the hall itself that acted as a kick in the rear, the unicorn's pace did speed up a little. They crossed the hall. Locke shoved open the door. A cobblestone path stretched before them, pointing straight to the exit. Almost there. Locke lifted herself up. The unicorn, however, nearly collapsed. The gate is already unlocked. Already covered it. Move. A pause. The unicorn didn't say anything, but chuckled a little and stood a touch higher again. They made it halfway down the path without incident. Locke glanced over her shoulder. Flames were leaping high from the house, curling up into the night, and a crowd was already forming outside the fence. Even as she watched, a pony pulled a siren's blaring fire engine up. Good. She dug her hooves in a little more. You still doing all right? She asked the unicorn. Enough, the unicorn gasped. Oh, Celestia. Thank you. I just got the snot beaten out of me by a bat pony, said Locke. Like that was gonna slow me down. She grinned crookedly at the unicorn. The unicorn coughed and flinched. Oh, well, You! They both turned to the unearthly bellow. An earth pony had burst from the house, blown straight past the other ponies, and was charging them, murder in her eyes and spittle flying from her mouth. I'll rip your spine out through your sun-blasted throat and skewer you on it like a kebab, she screamed. Clods of dirt flew as her hooves dug into the earth. The unicorn did her best to speed her pace up, but the earth pony was still outrunning them by a long shot. You? Or me? She gasped as the earth pony screamed further invectives. Me, grunted Locke. She walked faster, slowly turning from supporting the unicorn to sort of dragging her. Definitely me. The gate was getting closer. Closer. She was hit from behind by what felt like a freight train and torn from the unicorn. She rolled across the lawn, alternatively penned between the earth pony's bulk and awkwardly falling on top of it. When she came to a halt, she was on her back. She looked up, and, through the swimming mass that was her vision, managed to make out an earth pony's crazed face, her bloodthirsty eyes. The earth pony raised a hoof, and a bolt of magic zipped through the fence and hit the earth pony in the chest. She flew over 10 feet across the lawn and plowed a furrow through the grass where she landed. Locke looked up. A unicorn in Royal Guard armor was outside the fence and running towards the gate. "Gate's unlocked!" Locke screamed at her. "Got it!" the guard shouted back. A haze of magic, and the gates flew open. Locke glanced around. The earth pony was staggering to her feet, but still dazed. The unicorn was crawling to the gate. Other ponies were fleeing the house, but none of them were coming for her. Locke dragged herself over to the unicorn, pulled her up, and started limping towards the gate. The guard ran through the gate and brushed past them. Locke wanted to look, but not until they were outside the gate. After all she'd been through tonight, and with her luck, the second she looked back, some security spell would slam the gate shut and weld the lock. She swiveled her ears back. She couldn't hear anything except the dull thuds of irregular hoof-on-grass impacts. No hoof-on-face impacts, at least. By the time the two of them crossed the gate threshold, Locke felt ready to collapse. Earth pony endurance or not, it had been a long night. She lowered the unicorn to the ground and cringed. Blood from the cut runes was smeared all over the unicorn's coat, glistening wetly. At least no more seemed to be dripping out from the cuts, and, thin as they were, they looked like they were scabbing over already. "Do you feel okay?" Locke asked. The unicorn coughed. "Tired. Sore. Cold. Wet. Pins and needles everywhere. Like I've been stabbed a few dozen times. But I'm alive." She smiled weakly. "Thanks." "Sure." Locke looked up, just to be sure the earth pony hadn't ripped the guard in half and was now coming for them. What she saw was the guard penning the earth pony down easily. A unicorn penning an earth pony. The guard batted aside the earth pony's wildly flailing hooves, shoved her horn into the latter's face, and shot off a spell. The earth pony stiffened for half a moment, then went limp. The guard pulled a set of hobbles from her saddlebags, fettered the earth pony, and dragged her back to the gate. When the guard arrived, Locke peered at the earth pony. She was still breathing regularly. "What did you do to her?" "Stunning spell," said the guard. "She'll be fine in the..." She stared at the unicorn, noticing the remains of the runes on her body for the first time. Her jaw dropped. "What in Celestia's name?" "I think she was due to be a sacrifice for a ritual or something," said Locke, conveniently leaving out what she was doing in the house in the first place. They could cover that later. "I don't know what for, and I don't know if the ponies killing her were part of a cult or whatever, but she was on a table, bound with runes, and this was nearby." She pulled the statuette from her bag, flinching at the feeling of pins in her bloodstream, and laid it on the grass in front of the guard. The eyes were back to glowing green, she noticed. The second Locke put it down, the guard gasped and threw a shield up around it. She squinted at it. "Yup," the guard muttered. "Grade A focus item right there. Vitality container, I think. Do you feel numb anywhere?" Locke ached so much numbness would have been a blessing. "No." "Good." To the unicorn, the guard said. "And you?" The unicorn shook her head. "Not really, no. Cold, and like all my legs have gone to sleep, but in the pins and needles way, not numb." "Oh, thank heavens." The guard wiped her forehead. "I'm pretty sure you'll be all right, metaphysically speaking." She looked over the unicorn and folded her ears back. "Physically, well, you'll live, but you'll have a lot of scars." The unicorn's laughter sounded like a cough from a laryngitic minotaur. "Scars are fine." Locke was only half listening to them. She sat and watched as the fire ponies sprayed the first jets of water onto the blaze. This was going to be a mess, she knew. One of Equestria's oldest families. She couldn't even remember which family, but one with that much money had to be old, right? Maybe. Caught up in black magic and equine sacrifice. Arson at a mansion. The main witness and the one who'd rescued the sacrifice was only in there to rob the place. It'd take weeks, probably moons, for this to get sorted out. It'd probably go down in history as one of those weird cases law enthusiasts and trivia buffs liked to talk about. Whatever. At least it wasn't her business anymore, except in a secondary fashion. Fine by her. She didn't get along well with law enforcement. The guard walked up next to Locke. For a second, silence. Then she asked, "So what happened in there? That's a pretty big fire. The ritual didn't go wrong because she's still alright." She nodded at the unicorn. "I mean, that looks like arson to me." "My fault," admitted Locke. "It was supposed to be a distraction." A plume of flame exploded from a third-story window. Sparks flew into the air as part of the outside wall collapsed. "Some distraction," said the guard. "But, hey, good on you for getting her out." She clapped Locke lightly on the back. "Not many ponies would have done that. And you kept wanting to turn back." Thanks." The guard briefly examined the focus item again, then stuffed it into a saddlebag, still with the shield up. "Could you come with me, please? We'll want to talk with you about..." She glanced at the burning house again and chuckled weakly. She turned her attention to the unicorn. "Come on, let's get you some first aid." She delicately hoisted the unicorn over her back. Locke stiffened. If she were questioned, they'd want to look through her bag. The haul in there was the whole reason she'd gotten into this mess in the first place. Not to mention it held her best and most varied set of tools. It was worth several million bits, at least. And she was supposed to just drop it? For a moment, she considered simply bolting. They had the witness and the focus item, and she could leave the books she'd taken. She was not going to have this whole night be for nothing. "It won't be for nothing. You saved a life." Unsure whether she was doing it because it was the right thing to do, or just to shut her conscience up, Locke took a deep breath, adjusted her saddlebags with all the loot she wouldn't be able to sell, and followed the guard back to the rest of her squad as the conflagration of the mansion licked the night away. The end. This was a fine story. I liked it, and I enjoyed reading over it again to present to all of you. Conflagration, that's a fun word. I also liked evilest looking. That is a fun word. Evilest looking. Well, that's the end. I hope you all liked it. And I hope you'll, listen to other stories of mine if you haven't already. Stories I've made a reading of, although I do have some stories I've made if you're interested. But anyway, I can't think of anything else I wanted to share about this part. Oh, yeah, also, I totally called it with lighting the mansion on fire. It's not a tricky one to call, but I did. I knew she was going to do that. Like, not knew, but I was pretty sure. Anyway, thank you all for listening. I hope you have a wonderful time. Goodbye, everyone.